Hey guys, I wanted to make this video, not to be too long, but I wanted it to be about a commander that you don't really see too many deck techs anymore, probably just because of how old it is. For those who are curious, I'm going to be doing a deck tech on my Carador, the Ghost Chieftain, EDH commander deck. So as you can see just by my playmat, I'm a big fan of graveyard decks. Meren was actually my original commander deck, and I ended up converting it to a Carador deck just because you get that extra color. This is the original card, most people would recognize it, but I actually like using this one. This is like kind of like a proxy. In my play group, we don't mind using proxies, especially if it's your commander, because it's not going to be in the deck, and obviously I own one, but I think this one just looks way cooler. But just to kind of go over what it does for those who don't know, it's 8 mana, so it costs Abzan and 5, so black, green, and white. And basically it says that this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard. And then during each of your turns, you may cast 1 creature card from your graveyard. So it essentially lets creatures in your graveyard be in your hand. And why that's significant is obviously you can grab kind of like a toolbox of creatures if they're in your graveyard. So the strategy goes, you want as many creatures in your graveyard as possible. If you're playing this deck correctly, your commander, Carador here, will only ever cost 3, because even if it dies and even with the commander tax, that still can be reduced past the 5 generic mana here. So it's a really, really strong commander, very survivable, very hard to stop. If you stop it, it can recover very easily, and that's why I love Abzan. It's absolutely my favorite colors. The white, added onto Golgari, so Abzan is just amazing. So let's get started with the deck, and obviously I'm going to explain some of the win conditions and why I have certain cards in there. This is updated up until Modern Horizons 2, actually, for August 2021. So just played with it the other day, won, and it's a really great card in the deck. So here we go. Let's start with the lands. So just to make you guys aware, I do not run every single amazing land card that I should. There are some expensive cards in the deck that I just had, but not every single one is going to be like that. So don't think you need that to make a good Carador deck. So the first one I run is the Fetchland Marshflats and Windswept Heath. So I don't actually run Verdant Catacombs just because I don't own one, and I don't want to spend $50+ to get one. So you don't really need it, but what they're meant to do is they're meant to grab you this card here. Indatha Trium, it's the foil full art, just showing that off a little bit. I love this art, it's so cool. But it's one of the tri-lands. It's a plain forest swamp, comes in tapped. Another cool tri-land, which a lot of people may not know about, is called Murmuring Bosk. It's actually a forest, and so it taps for green, but it's also a pain land, kind of like a Cave of Koilos combined with a forest. So you can add a black or white, and it does a damage to you. This will always come in tapped unless you have a Tree Folk in your hand when it comes out. I don't run any Tree Folk, so this is always coming in tapped. But still, it's a tri-land, so it's really good, and it's searchable. Typical command tower, of course. City of Brass. Add 1 mana of any color and deals 1 damage to you. So there's a couple of those. We got another one in Mana Confluence. Pay 1 life, add 1 of any color. Path of Ancestry. Probably a cuttable land if I could get one. If I ever get a Verdant Catacombs or a couple other different types of lands, this will be one of the ones I cut. But right now, it taps for any 3 color, and you get to scry when you cast your commander. I'm not a fan of how it comes in tapped as well, though. So on to some of the dual color lands. We got Shockland, Overgrown Tomb. Darkboar Pathway. This is one of those flip node cards that it can turn into either a green or black land, so those are important based on the game, and when you draw them, you can use it to be one or the other. Temple of Malady. Not a fan of the tapped, but the scry can be very helpful, very consistent. Llanowar Wastes. Painland for black-green. Onto the Orzhov colors, we got Godless Shrine, Shockland. The Nodal, Bright Climb Pathway, so it turns into, can tap for a white on this side, or you can flip it for a black. Silent Clearing, pay 1 life, add black or white. Cave of Koilos, the Orzhov Painland. Vault of Champions, this is the Battle Bonds, comes in untapped if you control 2 or more opponents, which you should always be doing if you're in a free-for-all 4v4, or what, free-for-all. Fetid Heath, filter lands. These can be really good because we run a lot of double pip, even triple pip colors, so sometimes we need 3 white, and this can make 2 of them, so that's nice. Definitely great card, I like these a lot. I run 2 of the 3 colors for that. Temple Garden, Getting into Selesnya now. Branchloft Pathway, it's green or white. I just like these arts, by the way. This is a really cool art. So part of PEDH is all about the art, right? You know, it's like you buy this card and, you know, sometimes I'll keep them in just because of the art. Anyways, we got Wooded Bastion, another filter land for Selesnya. Helps make double white, can make double green if you need it. Sungrass Prairie. These can be a little annoying sometimes because, yeah, you have to tap a generic mana, but you have to add a green or a white, I'm sorry. So sometimes you don't want both, or sometimes it just screws up with your colors, but normally it works for what it needs to happen. Bountiful Promenade comes in untapped if you have 2 or more opponents. This is Selesnya Battle Bonds land. And then the Pain land, Brushland. Now we're getting into some utility lands. Vault of the Archangel, such an underrated card, especially in this deck. You're going to be running a lot of creatures. Being able to give your creatures Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. You can use that defensively or offensively. You know, some people forget the lands on the field and you have some mana up, they attack into you, you block with stuff, and you know, you basically kill all their creatures and gain life for it. Or you can gain life because one of our win conditions is Veto, which I'll get into a little bit, but it's amazing to swing in with 5 huge creatures, gain, you know, 21 life, and then ping someone else for 21 on top of the damage that they took. So another really good card here, Field of the Dead. So fun fact about this deck, every single land is a singleton. I run 3 basic lands, 1 of each color. We'll get to that in a second, and I'll explain why. For those who don't know, there's a really good combo that just goes through and makes the deck really easy. But so my 7th land on for Field of the Dead, you're getting the zombie every single time. No happening every time. No what's it called? No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You're going to be getting that zombie. So this is a really good card. It comes in tapped, but every time a land that is a different land on the field that comes onto your field, you get that zombie. So it's going to add up over time, especially if you're using fetch lands and other lands that can sack themselves. Gaia Reach Sanitarium adds generic mana, but you pay 2 and tap it, and each player draws a card, then discards a card. This is really good for getting big creatures into your graveyard. You know, you have a 8-cost creature, and it's turn 5, and you're, you know, pretty far away from, you know, maybe getting one out. So you can just draw a new card and then discard the big card to reanimate later, or right on the spot with some of our sorceries. So this card is coming clutch. Strip Mine. I typically don't use it for the destroy land, but having it there is always good. Usually I'm just using it for the generic mana, but at the end of the day, having it there to blow up someone's Dark Depths or Cabal Coffers or just something, you know, Gaia's Cradle, just being able to do so can be threatening enough. Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, make everything a swamp. It's kind of color fixing for me. You know, we do run a lot of, like I said, triple pip cards, so triple black, triple green, triple white. I have all of those in there. They can be a little tough to cast sometimes, even with 3 colors if you have the right mana base, but this makes all your land swamps, all your opponents as well. I do not run Cabal Coffers just because the deck is not predominantly black, so a lot of times I find myself not needing it, but definitely a good utility card. And then the only other, I guess, single land color would be Okina, Temple of the Grandfathers. Like I said, every land needs to be different. The reason why this isn't a forest is because of the next 3 cards. But basically, this can be technically, essentially a forest that comes into untapped, but technically not a forest, if that makes sense. So just another good card. And then we run 3 of the basic lands. And I will go into why. Obviously, you probably know. If not, there's a card called Hermit Druid, and we'll get into that in a sec. But 3 basic lands is all you need to run this deck to be efficient. So on to the artifacts. You guessed it, Sol Ring. You know, every deck pretty much needs one. I'm sure there's some exceptions out there, but I haven't seen any. So Sol Ring is amazing. Perpetual Timepiece. This card, underrated. Really cheap, not an expensive card to pick up. Cost 2. You tap it and basically mill 2 from your own deck. Great for getting stuff in the graveyard, great for filling your graveyard with creatures, and just basically putting your creatures to be another hand for Karador. But it also has graveyard protection in the sense that if you have 2 mana up, you can exile this, and you can shuffle any number of target cards in your library from your graveyard into your library. So it's kind of essentially like someone is going to Bojuka Bog you or Rest in Peace or do some sort of graveyard hate to get rid of your graveyard. You can essentially exile it on the stack, shuffle everything into your deck, and it's better than it being exiled. Yes, you have to kind of start over and rebuild, but it's still better than having some of those things being exiled. So amazing card. Sensei's Divine Top, and I'll go with the Bolas' Citadel kind of as a twofer. So this is a win condition, essentially. If you have both of these out, you're basically winning. Bolas' Citadel is such an amazing card. For those who don't know what it is, you can look at the top card of your library, and you can cast the top card of your library, but you pay life instead of mana. So it's amazing. The only thing that stops this is having a land when you can't play any more lands on top of your library. And that's what this is for. So if you do have a land, you can basically tap this to draw a card. So you draw that land that's on top, and then you put this on top of your deck. And then you pay 1 life and recast it because it's on the top of your deck with this. So this combo, this is essentially top deck manipulation, and you can just keep going, hit a land, put it on top, pay 1 life. Keep going, hit a land, put it on top, pay 1 life. So this basically cycles through your entire deck. The only thing you gotta watch out for is, you have 40 life, but we'll get to that in a second. I've solved that problem too. So not a lot of artifacts, only 4. But so getting into the enchantments, I do run a little bit of a good enchantment package here, and I'll explain why as well. But kind of a win con here. Concordant Crossroad. It's an enchant world, so it applies to everyone, but creatures you control have haste. That's what all that text says. It's an old text. I think that's a Birds of Paradise in the background. But anyways, you don't want to play this unless you're about to win. But, we run cards that bring back a ton of creatures from your graveyard. You can basically flood all your creatures onto the battlefield, like with the Bolas' Citadel. And what ends up happening is you'll find that you have a ton of creatures, 10 new creatures that enter the battlefield. None of them have haste. So you want to hold on to this, save up 1 green mana, and cast this after that and be like, all right, now everything has haste, swing in and win. That's the most simple way to win. That's definitely not the only way to win. That's why I like these types of decks, graveyard decks. They're very toolboxy. You have a ton of options. So this is just one of them. Nothing can be too good for being repeatable or having multiple effects of the same thing. So Dance of the Dead is a recursion effect. Yes, our commander is, but if we have an 8 converted mana cost creature in the graveyard, like a Terastodon, and you have a Carador out, you can spend 8 mana to bring it out, or you can spend 2 and bring it out. So I really like Dance of the Dead. I love the art. The only issue that I have with this card is that the card comes in tapped. So you want it to be something that maybe has an enter the battlefield effect or having a presence on the battlefield, but it's probably not going to untap because you're not going to waste the mana. You have to pay a black and a colorless every untap step in your upkeep to basically untap it. And then if you're just going to attack with it, it'll tap again. So this is meant to basically bring a creature out and have that creature do its effect and then essentially die. Another similar one, Animate Dead. This is much better of a card between the two if I had to say so, but it comes in untapped, so it's normal, but then it's -1 to its power, which isn't terrible. So Sylvan Library. This card underrated, I think. Maybe not, but at the same time, I've seen people start to kind of stray away from this, and I love it. It's a little bit of top deck manipulation if you don't want to take all 3 cards, but in your draw step, you draw 3. You can pick any number of them. Any number past the first, you got to pay 4 life. So if you take 2 cards, you're paying 4. If you take 3 cards, you pay 8. Otherwise, you put them back in any order. So this can be comboed very well with top deck manipulation and just milling and everything. So next, I'm going to show you guys the absolute best Abzan card that there is. You guys ready for this? I think this card is the most underrated card in the entire deck. Hunting Grounds. Yes, I said Abzan, even though this is a Selesnya colors, because this card on its own has won me so many games. So it has Threshold, which is why it's Abzan, because I don't think this card is really good in anything but running black with it. So whenever an opponent plays a spell, so when they cast a spell of any type, you may put a creature card from your hand into play. How insane. It costs 2 mana, and you can put a creature from your hand into play. I've dropped 6 creatures throughout the entire turn sequence, going from my opponents, all 3 of my opponents and back to me. I've dropped 6 creatures because they either don't blow it up or they just can't, or you drop a card that prevents them from doing so. But this has Threshold, and what Threshold means is you need to have 7 or more cards in your graveyard. That's it. So in a normal Selesnya deck, that may be a little more tougher to do than in an Abzan deck where you have black and your whole point is to mill. But think about having an Angel of Avacyn and a Terastodon and some of these big creatures I'll show you in a sec. All they have to do is cast a spell, Doesn't have to affect you, could be affecting someone else. It doesn't matter. Just they spent mana and cast something, whether it goes off or not, you get to drop a creature for free. It is the most ridiculous card, and I can't believe it was printed. So I love this card. Note that it's only 2 mana. That'll come in important later as well. More redundancy, Necromancy. This one's good because you can actually cast it at instant speed. A lot of people forget about that. You can basically reanimate a creature and it gets enchanted to this, or you can cast it at instant speed to bring back the creature when you need to. It just gets sacrificed at the end of the step. So it's really good on some certain creatures, especially enter the battlefield effect, or if you just need a blocker. Aura Shards. This is my main artifact and enchantment target removal. Creature enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact or enchantment. This card can go insane. It can basically blow up multiple artifacts or enchantments a turn. It all really depends on how well and how many creatures you can bring out. I mean, think of just Field of the Dead, the land card. You play your 8th land with this out, you get a zombie, blow it up. Play a land, get a zombie, blow something up. So very tough to get rid of. It's 3 mana, so it's a Sun Titan target. Everything here is Sun Titan or below target, so now we're getting into past the Sun Titan targets. If you don't know what Sun Titan is, I'll get to it in a sec, but Defense of the Heart. What this does is kind of a sitting duck. I've debated, this card has been in and out of the deck. I'm putting it in right now just because I think that with the way things are in the meta in my playgroup, it's not as much of a threat based on all the other ridiculous cards that are out now, but as long as an opponent has 2 or more creatures, during my upkeep, you sacrifice Defense of the Heart, and you basically get to tooth and nail. You get to go search for 2 creatures and just bring them out. So part of the best part about having a graveyard deck and a creature deck is learning how to cheat them out easily. And this is an amazing way to cheat it out. You go and get 2. It's essentially like casting Tooth and Nail Entwined, but it's only 4 mana. The only problem is you play it and you kind of, if it's active, like if someone does have 2 or more creatures, I'm sorry, 3 or more, I apologize. It's 3 or more creatures, which is still very easily obtained. But if someone does have that, then this becomes like the biggest threat because they know you're going to go get 2 ridiculous things. Smothering Tithe. This card has saved my butt a lot, just with color fixing. You know, if you have something wrong with your colors, you can't get the right colors, or you just need more mana. You know, you can have 7 mana on turn 4, 8 mana is because you play this, and then as it goes around, no one's paying for it. So, and then lastly, Greater Good. It's a great draw engine, it's a sack outlet, and it's a discard engine. So you draw into stuff, you discard your big creatures, you can sack your big creatures. You know, you sack, again, a Terracodon, which is in the deck, draw 9, discard 3, that's a +6. You know what I mean? And that Terracodon's not dead for good, it's coming back. So, amazing card. So, run a good, decent enchantment package. So now I'm going to get into the instant and sorceries. We'll go by converted mana cost for that. Number 1, Vampiric Tutor. I don't run Demonic Tutor, but I do run Vampiric Tutor. Only reason, 1, I only have 1 Demonic Tutor, it's in another deck, but 2, Vampiric Tutor is better in this deck because the card that you want to choose goes on top of your library. And normally you're going right to your hand would be the best, but with your Bolas' Citadel, this actually is a better card than Demonic Tutor. So if you're not familiar with it, it's one of the best cards in Magic, especially EDH right now. Reanimate, simple spell. Pay 1 black, reanimate any creature from anywhere. It'll most likely be your graveyard. The only downside is you lose life equal to its mana value. So, you know, again, I'm going to use Terracodon as an example. You reanimate a Terracodon, it comes out, you lose 8, but then you get to use its effect. Green Sun Zenith. This card is great for getting, obviously, your green creatures. There's 1 green creature in the deck called Hermit Druid that I go for every time as best as you can. It's pretty broken. I'll get to it in a second when I go through the creatures, but the cool part about this is it shuffles into the deck and you can basically redraw it and use it again. There's enough green creatures to make this worth it, and it does not cost a lot. You can pull a creature right from your deck onto the battlefield. Life from the Loam, one of the best recovery cards out there. It's got a dredge effect, but basically you can return up to 3 land cards from your graveyard to your hand, and that's very essential while you're milling so much, milling yourself, because there might come a point where you need some lands, or lands get destroyed, or lands go to the graveyard and you want to get them back. And then on top of that, if you need to mill more, if this is in the graveyard, you can dredge it, so instead of drawing, you basically return this to your hand, and then you mill 3 cards. That's what the dredge down here says. It's the only dredge card I run, because it's really the only one you need. It's amazing for lands. It helps you fix if you get mana screwed. Well, check your graveyard, you know. It's definitely been a reliable source for me. Eladamri's Call. It's an instant. Selesnya, black, green, white. Search your library for any creature, reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle your library. Simple creature spell. I do like this card better than Worldly Tutor, just because it does go to your hand, because usually I get this early before I can get out of Bolas's Citadel. And it's definitely, I mean, I've gotten Hermit Druid off of it. You cast it, you know, in your opponent's end step right before your turn, and then all of a sudden you got your Hermit Druid on the field because it's in your hand. You can cast it. If you can cast this, you can cast a Hermit Druid. So, great card. Bala Ged Recovery. This is basically a sorcery of an Eternal Witness. So return target card from your graveyard to your hand. It also can flip into a land, so it does help with the lands. Maybe I should have included it in the lands, but I typically use this to return, you know, something if either Eternal Witness is stuck in my deck or somehow has been exiled or whatever. It's kind of like a backup. And then worst case scenario, if you need it, it can turn into a green source. Buried Alive. This essentially says search for 3 creatures, put them in your hand, because with your commander in the field, your graveyard is your hand. But Buried Alive, search for 3 creatures, and then you dump them into your graveyard. Amazing if you need a mass reanimate, or if you just need to get specific creatures in the graveyard to reanimate. This really goes a long way. One of the ways you can do that is by pulling them out with Victimize. I love the art on this card as well. But Victimize, you sacrifice 1 creature, and then you get back 2 creatures, and they come in tapped. So sacrifice your Hermit Druid, bring out 2 converted mana cost 8s, you know? Something like that, something crazy. Probably the second best sorcery in the deck, Replenish. It's kind of an expensive card. I just had one, so I threw this in here, but with my enchantment package, it works really well. You know, you mill a ton with a Hermit Druid, and then you enchant, you replenish, and all your enchantments come back onto the battlefield. You know, I think we run 14 enchantments, including enchantment creatures, and, you know, they can all come back. I've had times where I've brought back 7 or 8, 9, 10, you know, 4 mana for 15 mana value worth of cards. So really good. This is absolutely by far the best card in the deck, and every graveyard deck should run this card. The only time you don't play this card is if your opponent has better creatures in their graveyard than you, and that's very ever rarely the case, unless maybe you're playing another graveyard deck, in which case hold off. But essentially Living Death, it's such an underrated card. I feel like nobody in my play group uses it. It's crazy. But it's a board wipe, so the first thing you do is you exile all the cards in your graveyard, or I'm sorry, all the creatures. Creatures in your graveyard get exiled. Then you sacrifice the entire field. And then the creatures that were exiled come onto the battlefield. So you swap your field and your graveyard with creatures. And it's such a swing. Like you can get 50 mana value worth of cards from this, from 5. So you can get 10 times your investment in mana on this with creatures. I mean, you can win immediately. You know, you bring out 10 amazing creatures, you drop your Concordant Crossroads, you swing in for game. You know, and there's other cards that just on entering battle effect, you can win that way too. So this is always the go-to. This is the main plan. Go into a Hermit Druid, mill a ton, get a Living Death. If you end up milling the Living Death, you can get it back with that sorcery, Bala Ged Recovery, or an Eternal Witness, which is also in here. But this card is incredible. Speaking of underrated cards, this card is wildly underused. It's still new, so maybe it hasn't caught on, but this card is awesome, especially for this deck. It's Stinging Study. I think it was in the new Commander set from Strixhaven, the Black-White Silver Quill, I believe. So it's an instant, costs 5, so it's a little much. You draw X cards, and you lose X life, where X is the mana value of a commander you own or in the command zone. Well, our commander costs 8. We're never going to cast him for 8. He's pretty much always going to be 3, but this means that you get to draw 8 cards. You also lose 8 life, but that's kind of not that big of a deal because you're drawing 8 cards. So basically what this essentially says is your commander costs 3, but really it costs 8. So it's come in handy a lot. You know, just being able to do that at your opponent's end step, drawing 8, and then you draw your 9th, and then whatever else you had in your hand. Let's say you had, you know, hunting grounds on the field, and you just drew 7 more creatures. Well, you just replenished your hand to drop more creatures for free, or whatever it may be. Just very underrated card. And then probably my favorite board wipe, Hour of Revelation. 6 mana, it's kind of a lot, but you never cast it for 6 mana. It costs 3 generic less to cast if there are 10 or more non-land permanents on the field, and it just destroys all non-land permanents. So you reset the field back to lands, essentially. It's a great card if you're behind. If you're falling behind and your opponents have, you know, they're building up, this can take it all down. or even if you end up destroying some of your own stuff, because you can recover faster than anyone else. You typically only cast it for triple white, because you usually only cast it when there's 10 or more, and it's not that hard to get. Probably by turn 4 sometimes it happens. But best case scenario, you have an Angel of Avacyn out and all your stuff is indestructible, and you cast this for 3, you wipe out everyone else's field back down to their lands, and you swing in, and they have a real tough time rebuilding. So that's the deck so far, and I'm going to get into the creatures. Probably the longer session, trying to keep this short, but I want to go through to explain why each card is in the deck. So first up, 1 mana, Viscera Seer. Amazing sack outlet, scry 1, probably the best sack outlet out there on a creature, instant speed. Top deck manipulation if you have enough creatures, so if you don't have that, if you don't have that 1 mana card, I'm sorry, the 1 mana artifact, Sensei's Divine Top, then this can kind of replace that if you're trying to use your Bolas' Citadel. Kami of False Hope. It's a white version of Sporefrog. For those of you who like Sporefrog in a Marin deck, this is Kami in a Carador deck. Does the exact same thing, costs 1 mana. So you can sack it with Carador out, you bring it right back, 1 white mana. So if you're in trouble and you need to just basically hold from an aggro deck from killing you or whatever it may be, this card has saved me a ton until you build up what you need. Satyr Wayfinder. It's a great way to mill. So basically when it comes out, you mill 4, you can put a land from among those 4 into your hand, rest in the graveyard. So it's another way to mill. So you bring it out, mill yourself, you know, it dies, bring it back, mill another, you mill yourself again. So it's a great way to do so with that. Ailey, Eternal Pilgrim. This is a sack outlet. It costs 1 generic mana to sacrifice a creature, and then you gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. So that can help a lot, you know, like especially if you're paying that stinging study where you have to pay 8 to draw 8. You can easily get that 8 back by sacrificing creatures. And then this nice little effect, I don't use it that much, but you can pay a white, a black, and a generic, sacrifice a creature. You can exile a target non-land permanent, but you can only activate this if you have at least 10 or more than your starting life total. So basically 50. You need 50 or more life to do that, which isn't terribly hard, but we have better ways of removal. It's also got Death Touch. So this little guy or girl, whatever, she does a lot of awesome stuff for Carador. Another new card. Keen Duelist. You could also replace this with that expensive card, Dark Confidant, but I like this one a little bit better for one reason, and that is we run a lot of big creatures, and we can basically do a lot of damage to our opponents with them. So what this does is during your upkeep, you reveal the top card of your library, you pick another opponent, and they reveal the top card of theirs, and you both lose life equal to the card that you revealed for the other person. So if they reveal a 4 and you reveal a 7, they lose 7 and you lose 4. So it's risky because but you have an idea of the decks you're playing. Sometimes you hit lands, but it's not card draw, but it definitely gets you cards throughout the game, and you have pretty high converted mana costs in this deck based on how often you can cheat stuff out. So this card has been pretty good. Another really underrated card that I think some people don't even know it exists. It's called Restoration Specialist. This card, I love this card. It costs 1 and a white for a 2/1. It's a Dwarf Artificer, cool. But you pay a white and you sacrifice it. Return up to 1 artifact card and up to 1 target enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. So this is a 2-for-1. You pay a white, you get back a Soul Ring and an Animate Dead, or you get back your Bolas' Citadel that you milled and some other enchantment. So you can get back 2 cards with this 1, and then just recast it from your graveyard with Carador. So it's really, really good. It's super easy to recover. They blow up your Soul Ring, no big deal. I'll just get it back. So as long as they're not exiling your graveyard, you can always get everything back, which is awesome. Another new card. I love this card. The art on it looks awesome, but Priest of the Fellrites. It's a 2/2 human warlock, Orzhov, so black and white. You tap it, you pay 3 life, and you sacrifice this card. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. You can only use it as a sorcery, which is fine, so just do it on your turn. It also has Unearth, which you probably don't need, honestly, because what's cool about this is you can just recast it with Carador. You can recast it with another card that I'll get to in a second. So you don't even need the Unearth effect because then it gets permanently exiled. But this card is basically like another Reanimate, but it only costs 3 mana. You gotta wait a turn unless you got haste, but still, just having that out as a way to be like, okay, let me sacrifice this, let me get back a big beater, or part of my combo. So it's another really great card. Aegis of the Gods, so enchantment creature, part of the enchantment package. Very simple text, you have hexproof. Why is this important? Because everyone and their mother is going to be coming after your graveyard. And there's a lot of graveyard hate cards in the game, but very few of them are blanket exile, meaning exile everyone's graveyard. There's a couple that I can think of, the Ashiok Planeswalker, Rest in Peace. So those, this card does not protect from, but everything else, like a Bojuka Bog, or Tormod's Crypt, or any of those graveyard hate cards, this will prevent them from targeting you when they exile the graveyard. So having this card out when you mill with Hermit Druid, you have that extra protection knowing that your graveyard's not going to get exiled come before your next turn, so you can do some cool stuff with it. Prize of the deck, the reason why this deck is so good, just a ridiculous card. This is Jason Momoa as Aquaman. It looks like him, doesn't it? Anyways, Hermit Druid. So it's you pay a green and you tap him, and you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a basic land card. Put that card in your hand, put the rest in your graveyard. If you show it in the beginning of the video, I had 3 basic lands. This card is the engine. You know, there are other ways to win with this deck without this card, but this card does it so efficiently and so quickly if you have it out. You know, if you draw it in your opening hand, it's almost game over. The only way it's not is if they exile it, because even if you destroy it and it goes to the graveyard, it's coming back. Absolutely, it's coming back until I can do it. You know, you can't do it the turn it comes out, unfortunately, but you know, I think it'd probably be banned if you could, if it had haste or something, although there's cards in the deck that can give it haste. However, I put 3 basic lands in the deck. I just wanted to talk real quick about my reasoning. One is obviously nowhere near enough, because if you get it early, then you basically can't use its effect again. Obviously, best case scenario would be it's at the bottom of the deck and you mill like your entire deck, but that's still, it's too risky. 2 is kind of the same thing. You know, you really only get 2 shots at it. So 3 was the perfect amount, 1 of each color. It also gets you a land, so if you don't have a land, it gets you one of the basic lands. Just puts it right in your hand, but I found 3 was the perfect amount to mill a ton of cards, but still not mill your entire deck and still mill a decent amount. So Hermit Druid, amazing. You know, I search for it as best I can whenever I can, and basically it starts the whole engine of the deck. Ramunap Excavator, 2/3 Naga Cleric. It's basically got the Crucible of Worlds effect on a green creature. You may pay life instead of, I'm sorry, you may play land cards from your graveyard. Sorry, my phone battery. So yeah, you mill a ton of lands, and then you can basically bring them out onto the field, one at a time. But still, your graveyard is now a hand for lands as well, not just creatures. Eternal Witness, similar to that Bala Ged Recovery. I like the old art, even though I got sick of looking at it after a while. I'm glad they reprinted it, but this old art is pretty cool. When it enters the battlefield, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Dryad of the Elysian Grove, legendary. It's an enchantment creature, Nymph. Definitely a legendary card in this, not actually legendary, but you know what I mean. You can play an additional land on each of your turns, and it color fixes for you. So immediately when this card came out, I replaced it with Chromatic Lantern. This card, to me, is better than Chromatic Lantern. You get to play 2 lands a turn, and all lands are any basic land type. So you've basically color fixed forever. So really, really good card, and it's 2/4, so it's a pretty good blocker. Recruiter of the Guard. When enters the battlefield, search for a creature with toughness 2 or less, put it in your hand. Number 1 target, Hermit Druid. If that's already out, or it's dead or whatever, you've used it, this can get a bunch of other cards. The Kami of False Hope, Spore Frog effect, a couple other cards I'm going to show you, but it's not converted mana cost, it's toughness 2 or less. So there's a lot of high mana value creatures that are 2 or less you can grab. One of the win conditions, Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose. It's basically Sanguine Bond on a stick, so whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. So each individual effect of life gain. So if you gain 39 life, which there's a way to do that with 1 card, but if you gain 39 life from other cards, you can ping your opponents based on the amount of life you gain. So you attack with like 10 creatures and it equates to 39. You can ping all 3 people and split it up and however you want, you know, based on how you gain the life. But the reason why this card is good, not just because of that, but it also allows your creatures to be given lifelink. So the second effect, pay 3 generic and 2 black. Creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. So it basically allows you to do it. To me, it's much, much better than a Sanguine Bond. it's a creature, of course, so you can cast it with Carador. It costs less, so, you know, when I bring it out, it's going to be close to game over. Lurrus of the Dream Den. Another awesome card. Love this card. Ignore the companion. It doesn't matter whatsoever. It's got lifelink. That's a cool little perk, but the reason why this card is amazing is because during each of your turns, you may cast one permanent spell with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard. That doesn't just mean creature, that's one permanent spell. So it's like a Muldrotha, but for 2 or less converted mana cost. So that can be Sol Ring, that can be the Hunting Grounds, Sylvan Library, Animate Dead, any of your creatures. Hermit Druid costs 2, you can cast it with this card. Amazing card, so many cool interactions and synergies you can use with this. There's been times when I had Carador on the field, this in the graveyard, cast this with Carador, cast Animate Dead with this, grab an Angel of Avacyn. So I saved myself 3 mana. You know, you recover so fast in this deck as long as you have your graveyard. That's what I just love about this deck. So getting into the 4s, Elvish Piper. You definitely need cards to help you get creatures out of your hand. This card does that probably the best. It's a 1/1, so it's prone to little ping attacks or going after. People will go after this creature, but if you can get her on the table or you can give it haste, you pay a green and tap it, put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Just a great card to just empty your hand if you need it. Eidolon of Blossoms, one of our draw engines. When it comes out or another enchantment comes out, you draw a card. I think we run 14, like I was saying. You have a replenish. That can be a ridiculous replenish of your hand as well if this is in your graveyard when you replenish or it's on the field. You're also having little enchantments die and come back often enough that this card can draw you 5 to 15 cards in a game. It's definitely a noticeable amount where you want to keep this card in. World Shaper, another amazing card. It mills, so when you attack, you mill 3. And people will probably want to keep this alive because when it dies, you return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So let's say you have 10 lands, one of them being a Field of the Dead. This dies, you get all those lands back, and you get 10 zombies. And if you have something else that, like Aura Shards, you can kill 10 enchantments or artifacts. So this card's amazing. It also helps you mill. New card, Thraben Watcher. It's an angel, flying vigilance. It's a 2/2, but other non-token creatures you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance. I don't even care about the +1/+1, although it's a great perk, but the fact that all your non-token creatures gain vigilance. The problem I was having that this card fixed was you'd play Living Death, you'd bring out 10 creatures, you'd even make them have haste, but it wasn't enough to kill the whole table, and you'd swing, and you'd tap all your creatures to win, or to knock out an opponent, I'm sorry. And then there's still 2 left, or maybe 1 left. And then you lose on the crackback or whatever. So the fact that they have vigilance because of this card, now they don't tap, and now you can block as well. So it's like attack and defense. Vigilance is such a good keyword. Shalai, Voice of Plenty. There's definitely an angel sub-theme in this deck. Angels are just amazing. Planeswalkers you control, we don't have any, so that's irrelevant. But you and other creatures you control have hexproof. So this is another Aegis of the Gods. It gives you hexproof, so it protects you in your graveyard, but it also gives all your other creatures hexproof, including, the little creatures, the little guys. The only way to get rid of that is to get rid of this. This does not have hexproof. There's another big enchantment creature that gives everything hexproof, but this one doesn't. And then if you need to pump your guys up because you have extra mana, you can do that as well. Tristani, Selesnya's Voice. When another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to its toughness. So now you guys see how we can basically win off of 1 Living Death. If this card and Veto is in our graveyard with 10 creatures, we're going to gain life for every creature that comes out. And when we gain the life of those creatures, we ping our opponent with Veto. So you don't even have to attack. Living Death can be the game winner. Love this card. I don't really use the Populate because we don't run that many tokens. But just the fact that you can gain the life back. Even if you're not winning and you're just gaining your life back, it's amazing for Bolas the Citadel. You have a converted mana cost 5 on the top of your deck. You pay 5 life, bring it out, gain 4 of it back because of this card if it's on the field. So just amazing synergy. It helps replenish you. Cavalier of Dawn, another triple white pip, but I like it a lot. It's a 4/6 with vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, you can destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 golem artifact creature token. Not bad. You can basically ping anything but a land. Pretty good. And then when it dies, you get to return an artifact or enchantment from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it's kind of a combination of two. It's a single target removal. Yes, they get a token, but who cares? It's a 3/3. You know, you just blow it up with your aura shards. But when it dies, you get to also recur an artifact or enchantment. Reveillark, also a great card, underrated. You can evoke it. You pay the evoke cost, it comes out and immediately dies, and you pretty much want it to die, because when it dies, you can return up to 2 creature cards with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So right away, Hermit Druid's less than 2, the Tristani card I just showed you is less than 2, Veto is less than 2, Karmic Guide's less than 2, which is the next card, Karmic Guide. When Karmic Guide enters the battlefield, return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is another reanimate. So this dies, you can bring back Karmic Guide and something else. The Karmic Guide can bring this back again, and you can just keep kind of comboing out. I don't run any infinite combos because I'm not that guy. They're boring to me. So I don't run the Safri Eric's Daughter combo with these. If you have that, you basically have these 3 cards with these 2 and then Safri. You basically can pull every creature from your graveyard onto the battlefield within a loop. It's not very fun. You also need a sack outlet, but it's just not as fun. So I don't do it anymore. So Reveillark, Karmic Guide, Teneb, the Harvester. Been in and out of the deck. I just like dragons. Obviously, they're cool. This is the Abzan dragon. It's flying, so when you do combat damage to a player, you can pay 2 and a black, and if you do, put target creature card into play under your control. So it's not just your graveyard. So it's great if you're going up against another graveyard deck. That's something that you can definitely take advantage of if you need to, but it's just another reanimate, and all you got to do is attack with it, and most people aren't blocking. Sun Titan, one of the combo generators. This card recovers so fast. So when it enters the battlefield or attacks, return any permanent with converted mana cost 3 or less. So that's a land if you want it to be, but it could be anything else that's 3 or less. So one of the coolest ways to recover, you know, let's say you just wipe the board, you can get back your Sun Titan, or you can get Sun Titan out maybe cheap. Sun Titan brings back Animate Dead from the graveyard. Animate Dead targets Karmic Guide. Karmic Guide comes out and immediately dies because it's protected from black, but before it does, it gets the Karmic Guide effect, and you bring out an Angel of Avacyn, and you went from no board to a Sun Titan and an Angel of Avacyn, and then you can swing with the Sun Titan if it has haste, and it does it all over again. So this card is probably the best way to recover from a board wipe, or just if your opponents go after you. Victory's Herald. This card was in and out of the deck as well. I took it out, and I actually noticed when I didn't have it, so that's why I put it back in. It's a 4/4 angel with flying. Whenever Victory Heralds attack, attacking creatures gain flying and lifelink until end of turn. So a lot of creatures on the ground get flying, and they all have lifelink. So you got a veto out. You know, you don't even have to pay to give everything lifelink. The fact that they all get flying means that they're probably getting through for most decks. So it's a huge swing. You know, I've done upward of 30 damage off of a swing, even more, but, you know, maybe average 20 to 30 damage. Then you gain all that life from lifelink, and then if you have veto out, you can just ping people for another 30. So if it's the same guy, you just did 60 damage to him, so he's absolutely dead. Mikaeus the Unhallowed. Great recursion card, great for enter the battlefield effects. Just extra protection for your creatures. When they die, if they don't already have a +1/+1, they get to come back with his undying effect. So you kill a Victory's Herald, you kill anything that's not a human, and it comes right back. Another thing to watch out for, a lot of people forget about it, is if a human does damage to you, this card would destroy it. So pay attention to people attacking you with humans, and his undying effect does not apply to humans, which makes sense. Don't know why they printed this card. This card is insane. Kodama of the East Tree. Got the foil when I could. It's a 6/6 with Reach Spirit, so it's already a pretty decent card, but this card is value train engine just exacerbated. It's ridiculous. So whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put on the battlefield with this ability, you may put a card with equal or lesser from your hand onto the battlefield. So it empties your hand. I mean, that example I just gave you earlier, you play a Sun Titan, you get a 6. The Sun Titan brings back an Animate Dead from the graveyard, now you get a 2 from your hand. The Animate Dead reanimates Karmic Guide, now you get a 5 from your hand. Karmic Guide brings back any creature, let's say it's an 8 like Avacyn, and now you get an 8 from your hand. So you can drop so much. You play a land, you get to play another land. You know, you have a token come out, you get to play a land. There's so many value, a lot of permanence in this deck that you just drop for free. Like Like, mana doesn't matter in this deck. It's crazy. That's why the lands are, you know, I think there's only like 33 lands, and that's fine, you know. And you don't even need it. It's crazy. This card is awesome. Probably one of the cards that people are going to blow up. Felidar Sovereign. So I kind of have 3 win conditions. This is the third one. The first one is just swinging in with everything and killing them. The second is pinging them to death with a veto, gaining life and making them lose life. You know, you can do that by swinging in, or you can do that by bringing out creatures. And then the third way is to basically just exist and not lose below 40 life. Felidar Sovereign, 4/6 Vigilance and Lifelink. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 40 or more life, you win the game. You can do that turn 2. I've won on turn 3 because you start with 40. So you draw your hand, you know, you draw your 8th card, and in there is a Swamp and a Reanimate and this card. And you do nothing, and you discard this card to the graveyard. Then turn 2, you play your Swamp, you reanimate this card. You lose 6 life. You can gain that back easily. Maybe not necessarily turn 3. It really just depends on what you have, but you know, you're going to have a target on your head if you do that. But regardless, it's very easy to go through and win this way, and I'll show you why in a sec. So another target removal, awesome card, Angel of Serenity. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile up to 3 cards, 3 other target creature cards from battlefield or graveyards. So when it comes out, you can exile cards from graveyards, but it's meant for exiling cards in the field. Basically, exile 3 monsters, and they stay exiled. And the way they stay exiled is you basically bring this out and sacrifice it before anything resolves. Because when it dies, the cards that you exiled return to their owner's hands. So the way that the stack works is this comes out, the enter the battlefield effect triggers, you target 3 creatures. Before it dies, before you actually resolve that effect, you sacrifice it, and the second effect goes off. And it says return all the exiled cards to their owner's hands. Well, there aren't any yet because it hasn't resolved. So that effect goes off, but they get nothing back, and then they all get exiled permanently. And yes, you lose this as well, but it basically exiles them permanently. Vishkal, Blood Arbiter. Another underrated card I don't really see too much. I think it's one of the best vampires. 5/5 flying with lifelink. Instant speed, sacrifice a creature, put X +1/+1 counters where X is the power of the sacrificed creature. Then you can remove all the counters to basically put -1/-1 counters on any creature. You can do this over and over and over again as long as you have creatures. So you can sack 1, remove it, kill a creature. Sack another thing, get 9 tokens with a Terastodon, ping it on something else. You can just keep doing that. And on top of that, if you don't want it, you just want to keep the counters on it, it becomes huge and it's got lifelink. So just overall, it's a really, really good card. Elesh Norn, of course, the only Praetor that I run from the 3 colors, but it's definitely the best. It's a 4-power swing. All creatures your opponents control get -2/-2. All creatures you control get +2/+2. It's just crazy. Platinum Angel. I know a lot of people think this card probably shouldn't be in the game of Magic, or they just think it's bad overall. But in this deck, it is amazing. Just ridiculous. You can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. Just the fact that it says you can't lose the game, you're already a ridiculously survivable deck. To have this card on the battlefield, yes, it's an artifact and a creature, so it's prone to the 2 most removable permanents, but you have ways to recur it, you have ways to, you know, give it hexproof, you have ways to make it indestructible, you have ways to stop them from doing anything. And the cool part about this is it stops combo decks from winning on the spot. So even if you got rid of the you can't lose, just having your opponent not be able to win makes things so much easier. It's like, yeah, go ahead and combo out, go ahead and lab man, draw your whole deck. You won't win still. So stuff like that, just like it just stops combos, and you protect this, and it's a really, really good card. Also, if you take negative life, you don't die. So that's really relevant for this next card. Another really underrated card I don't ever see anyone run. Resolute Archangel, 7 mana, so it's a lot, but it's a flying 4/4 angel. When Resolute Archangel enters the battlefield, if your life total is less than your starting life total, it becomes equal to your starting life total. So let's go back to Felidar Guardian. You need 40 life. You bring both of those out at the same time, you go to 40, in your upkeep, you win. Amazing card. How about if you have negative life? By the way, this works with veto. I've looked it up to make sure. If you have less than 40 and you go to 40, you gain life. And when you gain life, veto will trigger. You can have 1 life, play this card, gain 39 life, start at 40, and then Vito can do 39 damage to someone. Just insane. And then if you want to use it again, you can, you know, sacrifice it, bring it back when you need to. This card is the reason why you can go through your entire deck with Bolas' Citadel. You keep going through. Let's say you're paying a ton of life off of Bolas' Citadel, and then all of a sudden, oh crap, I'm below 10 life, I'm at 6 life, I'm at 5 life, 3 life, oh, got my Resolute Archangel, back up to 40, keep going. You cannot pay life that you don't have, obviously, so even with the Platinum Angel here, you know, you cannot go below negative life and keep paying life, so this just basically protects you from losing if you do go below, and then Resolute Archangel will just bring you right back to 40. I've had like negative 50 life, and then brought this out and gained 90 life, essentially, so just such a ridiculous card in this deck. Woodfall Prime is probably one of the cards I could take out if I wanted. It's a persist, so it works really well with Mikaeus the Unhallowed's Undying. When it dies, it comes right back, and it basically destroys anything but a creature. So you can basically kill your entire opponent's boards other than their creatures, because you just keep doing that. So not bad. Another card I keep talking about, Terastodon. When it comes out, you can destroy up to 3 non-creature permanents. For each permanent destroyed this way, they get a 3/3 green elephant. If you're going to do this, I recommend doing 1 per opponent, because if you do all 3 on one, they're going to get salty and come after you, and 2, they're going to have 9, you just gave them 9 power that they're going to basically come after you as well. So I like to try and split it up to ease the hate on me, but sometimes you can't based on the threat assessment, but that's one of the better ways to do it. Amazing target removal, Ashen Rider. Love this card. It's flying 5/5 Archon. When it enters the battlefield or dies, exile target permanent. So when it enters or dies. So if you have Mikaeus out, you can basically exile 3 things in 1 turn. You bring it out, sacrifice it, Mikaeus will reanimate it right away. That's 3 potential permanents that get exiled, and it's any permanent. No restriction on the permanent. So amazing. Archetype of Endurance. This is the other hexproof. Creatures you control have hexproof, and creatures your opponents control lose it and can never gain hexproof. So this card's awesome. You can get into a hexproof loop with this and the Shalai Angel. So this protects everything. The Shalai Angel protects itself, or everything but itself. This is also a creature, so this protects itself. That's why it's 8 mana, but it's also an enchantment, so it's prone to that, but it doesn't really matter. And then lastly, Angel of Avacyn, one of the better angels, probably one of the best. Flying Vigilance, indestructible, 8/8. Other permanents you control have indestructible. That's just so valuable. That means really the only way to kill it is if someone makes you sacrifice it, or they can bring you below 0 power with Toxic Deluge or -1/-1 counters. There's really no way to kill it otherwise, and all your permanents now are indestructible. So that is the deck that went on a little long, but I wanted to explain why you put the cards in, because I know when you watch deck tech, sometimes you're like, well, why does that? I wonder why you put that in. So that's my take on it, and let me know what you guys think. You know, if you have any suggestions, if you have anything I said that you disagree with or that you do agree with, let me know. It's community, and you know, I love graveyard decks. I have a Marin deck. Maybe I'll do that next. So I'd love to hear from what you think. Thanks.